we talked a little bit about problem solving and the importance of a process. And so we're going to talk about a bunch of different things, but I want to tell you, I was about to tell you this story and then I said, we'll start off with it. So one of my mentors is the former global CEO of Burger King. And one of the things, it's another guy I'd love to introduce you to. One of the things he always talked to me about was the power of a pre-mortem. And so often when there's a problem, we always do a post-mortem. What went wrong? What would we have done different? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he said, Josh, one of the things that I found great leaders do is pre-mortems. They get out there in front and go, what are all the things that could go wrong? What are all the things that we're not seeing? What are all the aha moments? And what we talked about a little bit ago, and I'd love for you to talk a little bit about is we live in a moment right now where there's some really big problems that need to be solved. But for whatever reason, we're all being very reactionary, and maybe it's funding, maybe it's timing, maybe it's emotional stress. But it seems like we're ending up having to do a lot of postmortems of what went wrong versus the premortems of what can we do to make sure nothing does go wrong. So let's talk a little bit about the importance of solving problems and how we do that, and then we'll get into tech and all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. Well, nothing like starting with a big idea. And I love your concept of pre-mortems. Sometimes it's easier to reflect than actually think ahead. And
Mm,
so when you've had an opportunity to iterate and fail, it's easier
mm,
but planning and ensuring and thinking through things and coming up with scenarios does not guarantee success. What it does do is just try and increases your chances of success. So I like this concept of pre-mortem. And we could put the pandemic in that situation. And let's do it for a second.
okay.
I've heard so many people who said that we cannot wait to emerge from the pandemic. And I have this to say to them. That is, there is no emerging from the pandemic.
Mm,
If you look back from 20 years ago to now, every 2 years, we've had a different type of pandemic. We had 9/11 in
mm.
2001. Okay. In 2003, we had SARS. 2005, we had, uh, I think we had Katrina. And if you can go through every 2 years. And so
And you have more crises. I mean, whether it's physical or whatever, our society gets rattled and disrupted every 24 months.
so absolutely. And so disruption is a part of life. Now you talk about and how do we get to this place? Well, we are all, I believe, almost every leader, successful or unsuccessful, in a bit of a hamster wheel
Mm,
as we rethink our business models and so forth. And stepping back to move forward is sometimes very difficult. And so I think the challenge for CEOs and organizations in general is how do we create this white space to step back to actually have pre-mortems.
mm.
Not I don't think there's an unwillingness to do it. It's really making that time and prioritizing because we've got too many things on our plate.
Yeah.
What I think though is we haven't realized is that most of the stuff that we think is important, our customers and our members don't really value.
Mm,
And the minute we hone into what truly is valuable, then we understand what we should be focusing on.
yeah.
And so as we think through premortem, I would ask every CEO to ask themselves this question. If they went away tomorrow, would anybody care?
Mm,
And if they did care, what do they care about? And start there
yeah.
and what they care about. And then let's talk about what is going to make us even more valuable of what
Yeah.
they care about.
Yeah.
Sometimes associations, especially, we have 25 different priorities. Well, no one can handle 25 priorities at the same time, unless they've got such an extensive team. And even if you've got an extensive team, you can look at companies that are successful and know that they are very focused on
Right.
where they're delivering.
Yep. I think the thing I want to pause and just settle in on for 1 second, or at least highlight it. You said sometimes or often it's easier to reflect than to plan, and I think it's true. I think it's for whatever reason it's easier to go what went wrong and kind of process that than doing the difficult work of thinking ahead of it. And I think that's what we talked about a minute ago is right now in society, we seem to be very reactionary, and we're using at times not the highest level of thinking to solve problems. It's almost this barbaric, who can be louder, who can panic most, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think there's such a powerful thought right now to pause and go, wait a minute. We have the power to use our brains to solve problems. So one of the things we talked about at IMAX was decentralizing and democratizing problem solving. We have lived in a world for years, and I was mentioning to you, a good friend of mine, Thomas DeBoss, who's head of global partnerships at State Department, like 7, 8 years ago, talking about the power of democratizing ideas. And that so often the best ideas are centralized in the Bay Area for the world. I'm in tech, whatever it might be. How do you decentralize and democratize ideas and problem solving? And isn't that what an association or an event's all about? Aren't we bringing people together in theory to idea share, but then to decentralize and democratize to go out? So I want to talk about that in a theory, and then I want to talk about it in practicality of how we do that using technology. But let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, well, but first and foremost, when you decentralize, the idea is the one closest to the problem or the challenge should help solve it.
Mm,
So inherently, there's agility in that mindset,
yeah.
right? So if you decentralize, hopefully you are more agile in
Mm,
solutions.
good.
The challenge could come with structures that becomes incredibly complex on how you make them happen. So decentralization doesn't come without its challenges, but it certainly allows you to be more agile and closer to the situation and the problems that you are trying to solve. And so I'm a big proponent of ensuring that we're decentralizing. Now let's get to the idea of democratizing um, an idea or knowledge or whatever it might be. In old school thinking, and let me put this thought out there, that strategy is a dime a dozen.
Mm,
Okay, its execution is where
yeah.
we fail. So let's park that for a moment. So if we can build upon an idea, okay, we should worry less about someone is going to cop. Most of the times, our problem is not actually seeking and gaining input. It's the fact that we are not lazily focused on execution.
Mm,
And our strategy needs to actually, we have to almost think of execution as our strategy. How
mm,
do we bring an idea into action? So, many people could have been Tesla and say, guess what? I think we've got a climate crisis. We should have these cars that are, or whatever it is. Who put into action
that's
is
right.
going to win.
Yep.
And so this notion that your idea somehow is going to be stolen,
Yeah.
knowledge is pretty ubiquitous as far as I'm concerned. So democratizing it is actually helping build upon your idea. And this goes back as in terms of technology, open source platforms, that
Yep.
you gain from doing that. Now, how you put the ideas into action, that's where the trick comes in. And most of us fail in executing upon our concepts.
I love that. And people ask me all the time, do you worry about even like folks that work for me, oh my gosh, like one of our competitors just signed up for a demo. I'm like, great, show them. I
Yeah,
mean, look, at the end of the day, the ideas and change moves so fast that by the time there's two things to think about. Number one, a copycat will always be a step behind, and a copycat won't come up with original ideas. And I think and that's not to say we shouldn't copycat, because I think we're always taking ideas from each other. But our job as leaders is to go, how do I research and duplicate what's out there? And how do I create new things? But to your point, at the end of the day, who solves the problem wins. Who solves the problem wins. And
absolutely.
to your point, the first thing we have to do, and let's talk about this for a minute. Here's a problem that we have is, how do we know, I said this the other day when I was talking with Bobby Hurd, Bobby, and I was saying there's an 80% problem or opportunity. Here's what it is. 20% of our members on average show up to an event, right? Because I'll ask people all the time, how many members do you have? And like, oh, we have 50,000. You're like, how many show up to your event? Oh, 10,000. You're like, well, what's everybody else doing? And then the second one is how much content gets consumed at the event? About 20%. So we've got this 80% bucket sitting out here of people and content that's just a huge opportunity that we can do something with. But the problem that we've got to solve is what's the business model around extending the association or event from physical only to year-round, decentralizing and democratizing, problem-solving, idea exchange, et cetera. How do we solve that? And that's the big, hairy question out there.
Well, I mean, and I do believe that it's actually less complicated than one thinks. And it's a matter of thinking how people consume what you have to offer, if indeed what you have to offer is valuable. And I want to go back first, before I try to address the question, is you talk about problem. And I fundamentally believe when people say they have a problem, they actually don't really understand what the true problem is.
Right.
And they're not getting to heart of what the problem is. Just let's take convening leaders, for example, which is in January 9th through 12th. It is impossible for every single PCMA member to be available on those days.
Mm-hmm.
They've got lives, they've got businesses that they're running. It's a fact of life.
Yep.
And so the fact that if 50% makes it, it's a miracle.
Right.
It's not unusual. Don't get upset at that.
And it's not because they don't want to. It's not a rejection. It's a fact of a dynamic life.
It is absolutely. So are you meeting your customers where they're at is the question, right? And are you meeting them? So now let's talk about what you are doing in these channels. There are things in a face-to-face environment that simply cannot be replicated in a digital environment. There are also things that you do not want to deliver in a face-to-face environment that you want to deliver in a digital environment. So we have to understand, even in a face-to-face environment, what we're producing, regardless if it's 20% or 50% of your audience can show up, what will they consume in a digital environment? And how are you providing that and creating it as an engaging experience? And that can be year-round, it could be 3 months later, it could be anytime.
Right.
But are you available for your customer when they want to access you? And if you're not available for your customer, then chances are they're going to go somewhere else to access what you're talking about. So I see that anyone that is only prepared to offer something in just a point in time, that's a very transactional approach to anything. And you can buy an Apple product any day, any hour of every minute of the day. Associations have to think like that. We've got to be accessible.
Well, and it's the irony of life is always a comic one. And you look at it and go, we're in the business of educating and connecting people at the core. Like if you want to just distill down what an event or an association is about, it's like we're in the business of educating and connecting people. And yet the irony of why we don't invest and throw ourselves into a solution that would do that year round every day. Because I mean, it's kind of like to the point you just made of if McDonald's, was, hey, we're in the business of burgers and fries. That's our business. We deliver that to people. And we're absolutely committed to doing it 13 days a year. You're like, well, I mean, you're not going to be in business long.
We don't eat only 13 days a year. We wouldn't be around, right? Organizations have to think the same way. I want to introduce another concept in this conversation, and then we can talk about being available or accessible, and easily accessible, not 25 clicks before you find me.
Right.
But why do people buy? Right? Why do people buy? They usually buy for two reasons only in life. One is for pleasure or to solve a pain. Pain or pleasure. That's the only reasons why they buy or why they engage in anything. Humans, that's what we do, right? So how we serve that up, we are having
Good.
we require pain or pleasure almost every day. Solve a pain or gain pleasure
Yeah.
every single day. So our organizations, if we think about that, are we accessible for people if they are trying to find something that will relieve their pain
Mm.
or give their organization pleasure or comfort or whatever they're looking for? How are we providing that? If I am trying to, if I want to read the latest book, am I going to have access to it? And that's a pleasure of mine. I want to read it. Or if I am actually trying to solve a complex problem or a challenge, and accessibility is critical. This is where technology comes in. I feel that when you talk about technology, and when we talk about technology, associations are starting to understand that technology is just enabling us to access our customers.
That's
And,
it.
and accessing your customer is critical, or your member, or whatever we call them. And if we do that and understand that we're using that to enhance whatever that experience is. Technology is not just for online engagement.
Right.
It should be for physical or any engagement that you use. You got to use it.
Well, think about it. It's I use technology for physical engagement all the time. For example, I just texted two of my buddies, hey, mountain bike tomorrow. Oh, I'm in Seattle. Oh, I'm in Palm Springs. How about Friday? What we're doing is we're using technology to gather information, connect so that we can do something physically. And I think that's where so much, we look at technology, we're like, oh, is this trying to replace something? No, it's trying to enhance something. And the more
Absolutely.
we can build strategies of enhancement. So one of the things that we're doing, Sherrif, you probably don't even know about this, but when we launched the platform in Juneau and CL22, is you can toggle between your region or the general experience. So I can be chatting and engaging with the whole conference, or I can swipe left and I can chat just with my region and like connect group. And so all these different layers where you're like, man, if I just want to be in a micro community and be gathering, I can. Or if I want to be in the macro one, I can. I can connect with people globally or locally. And we're just using it as accelerators. All right. So my 2 cents, let's see what we got here. My two
Yeah.
cents, how to convince all that knowledge without action is meaningless. Question. Why many great ideas never see the light of day? Answer. Not everyone has the same bully pulpit. For decades, we advocate moral, ethical, et cetera, et cetera. I'm just trying to read this quick. So at the end of the day, um, I think that was more about let us follow leaders, concerned organizations. So this is just a good thought of, this is a good point of view of while not everybody has the bully pulpit and not everybody has to communicate that, how do we then know? And this is a great point. I think it's Francisco there. We've talked about democratizing and decentralizing. This is the power of a digital platform. So you say not everybody has the bully, pulpit, but if you look at what's happened in technology, it's the rise of the insta famous. It's the rise of the digital influencer. And what you find is one of the beauties of the digital world is it does democratize a voice. It does democratize ideas. And so, Sheriff, we talked about this in IMEX. Let's go back to it. As we move away from the vertical and we go into the horizontal, this is when greater problems can be solved. So let's talk a little bit about how, from so many years, to Francisco's point here, we've kind of had bully pulpits and a vertical top-down approach to problem solving. We've now entered into a world over the last really decade, but let's call it 4 or 5 years, where horizontal peer-to-peer is becoming the new norm.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, and the term bully pulpit, that's an interesting term. Let's think back first and foremost, and just think when we went to school, and you're in your undergrad or even in high school, and you've got a teacher standing in front of you, and teaching you or lecturing you, and you've got 50 students or 35 students in a classroom. Well, if you think about that as you go through the journey of life, one person standing in front of you clearly does not have the collective knowledge of everybody.
Right, right.
And how do you bring that collective knowledge to surface is so important,
Mm,
because you can build upon ideas very, very quickly. And so the idea of democratizing involvement, frankly,
yes.
to elevate ideas is very important. Now let's go back. Let's go to problem solve. Let's go to organizations and agility. We talk about this word, but sometimes I think, Josh, it's just a nice word to say
Mm,
agile. We agile organizations. But
sure.
what does it mean? Well, people closest to the challenge and the problem should be able to solve those challenges and
Yeah,
problems,
yeah,
or at least surface the ideas. And we've got to create those environments
yep,
where those ideas are allowed to put into action.
yep.
And assuming that these things can cost money, they can whatever, then you've got to create systems where employees or wherever you do have the authority to actually enact those ideas and enact the solutions at a very, very localized level. Um, so I absolutely believe in democratization of response and ideas. I feel that our structures and organizations haven't kept up with that as yet, or it's evolving to keep up with that.
Sure.
The other thing that we've got to understand is, and this is must be known, and that is that ideas and knowledge do not have borders, right?
Mm, yeah.
There is no, you know what? My idea resides in the United States of America.
Mm,
Oh, you Germans cannot hear my ideas.
sure.
No, no, no. It's and the internet equalized that for the world.
Absolutely.
You can have access to ideas, but we learn from each other, because now you have an idea, and I'm based in Chicago, you're based in California, and someone is based in Munich. We all might have the same idea, but how we implement it based on a localized
Yeah,
solution, talking about democratizing,
yeah,
might be very, very different,
yeah.
because how people culturally and business norms will be different. So one of the makes democratization works in so many different ways, but it helps you to relate more culturally and to your area
Yeah.
of the world.
So, Sheriff, one of the things that that before I ever met you, I had founded a company called CrowdHub, which was and is to this day an innovative tech provider. So we'll go in and build custom software solutions for HP, the United Nations, a bunch of different groups. One of the ones that we built for was an association that is called Scoop, and they manage big printing presses for HP. And we built this really cool forum tool where, and just think about this from how we democratize. When people onboard onto a platform, they declare, this is like my skill set. This is what I'm good at. This is what I have knowledge about. And then what happens is on the forums, and we're going to be releasing this to the PCMA community in Q1, which we're excited about, is I could go into the forums and I could say, hey, I'm trying to figure out how to enhance my marketing. Let's just use that as a general thought. And I could tag marketing on my forum post, and the system will go out to every single person in the community that said that they're good at marketing. And it'll say, hey, Sherrif, you said you were good at marketing. Josh just had a marketing question. We think it'd be great if you shared your ideas with them. Now, I don't know, Sherrif. I don't know anything about them. I don't know anything, but the system knows that you said you're good at something. And now all of a sudden you're like, hey, Josh, I noticed you talked about marketing. I actually had declared I'm good at this. Here's how I'd solve your problem. Now, we did this for the printing press community. So somebody could go on and go, hey, I'm having a large format, paper ingestion problem. Well, it would send it out a note to everybody that said, I'm good at large format. And these people in Dubai and Russia and Spain and Omaha, Nebraska would get alerts and then all come back in and go, oh my gosh, whenever that happened to me on large format, this is what I would do. And you decentralized and you democratized, and the individual, all they had to do was post their challenge or post their ability, and these worlds would come together.
So think about what you just said. You think about what you said. You are actually doing two things at the same time. You're democratizing to solve a challenge.
Yep.
But guess what you're also doing? You're building a community of like interests indirectly.
Yep.
And so think, when we were only in the face-to-face format, how difficult that was to build a community.
Absolutely.
Now you can seemingly do it at the click of a mouse.
Yep.
And the power of when you bring that community face to face as well as digitally just allows you to solve challenges so much faster.
Yep.
And this is what's so exciting about that. So you solve your marketing problem, you solve whatever the issue. For me, I would like to find red wine drinkers, but you know, and
Right. I'll see you in a couple weeks.
yeah, absolutely. And let's talk about what good red wines. No, seriously speaking, though, if we understand that power and not be afraid of that power,
Yeah.
and understand that you know what, someone else idea can be better than our idea or help us refine our
Yep.
ideas. I frankly don't believe I want people to steal my ideas
Sure.
because it actually keeps me sharper.
Yep.
I want people to push me to be the next best me.
Yep.
And the only way I'm going to do that is by having fierce competition. The quickest way to mediocrity is not to have competition. And so I am absolutely not afraid of that. And I think any association or any of us in this business needs to make sure that we have robust competition.
Yeah. I think it's great. And I think it's funny. I like that you say this notion of, and we'll finish here the last 3 minutes. We're not exiting a pandemic. We're just always entering into the next season. There's no such thing as exiting. There's only entering. And I think if we keep thinking about that, it keeps our minds going. So I'll tell you this. This is great. Let me give this final thought, and you react to this. But I like this. This is what I did with my team yesterday. I'm going to pull this up. So you always think about ending, right? And so listen to this. If the Vikings, this is a football team, if the Vikings had not given up any points in the final 2 minutes of either half, they would be 12-0. Instead, they're 6-7. And this is what I think is so important. You get that mindset of, oh, it's almost halftime. Let's pull back. The game's already over. And you have that mindset that says pull back. And this incredible stat came up that said if the Vikings had not pulled back in the last 2 minutes of a game, they'd be undefeated. Instead, they have a losing record. And I think the challenge for all of us right now is whether it's the end of this year or whether it's moving into the next season, you cannot stop. You cannot quit. You cannot stop innovating, fighting, leading. If you keep doing it, you're going to win. If you quit,
I agree with you so much. And I want to really underline this. There's been incredible hurt, personal hurt, loss of lives because of the pandemic. But the pandemic also did not just happen to us, it happened for us.
Yeah.
It actually gave us permission to try and do a lot of different things that we not do. What I need to ask people this today is don't commit to try, commit to doing.
That's right.
And if you commit to do, you understand your members, your customers are giving you permission to innovate right now. Your 2030 plans have moved to today. Yeah. Don't wait to 2030. You wait to 2030, you're not going to be around.
No way.
And this is about agility. But the pandemic has done a lot of things personally to us that cost us a lot of heartache. But it's also opened up a whole world to us that we need to take advantage of. Absolutely. And it's the lens that we want to put on this.
Absolutely. Hey, thank you for sharing time. It's always so fun to talk both philosophically, but practically. And I think there's a power in that when we can have stimulating enough conversation that pushes us, but practical enough application that allows action to happen. So thank you for bringing both of those to us. It's a treat. And we can't wait to actionize all these ideas we're talking about in 2022 with PCMA. And we are going to show the world how a single destination platform allows us to decentralize and democratize problem solving and have some powerful outcomes.
Josh, thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Juno. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Can't wait to see you and everyone at Convening Leaders. And if we can't put ideas into action, then the ideas are worth just nothing but the paper they're written on. So we need to put them into action.
So true. Hey, bless you. Great to see you. I'll see you in a few weeks. Can't wait.